Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. This weekend we will see yet another Arnold Classic, this time in Brazil. We have guys from all over the world trying to claim a prestigious Arnold Classic title, and we also have a ton of South American natives competing in their own backyards. But the consensus seems to be that the top two will consist of these two guys. Tonio coming hot off a 8th place finish at the 2023 Mr. Olympia, and 3rd place at the 2024 Arnold Classic, a top 10 Olympia himself and a Brazilian native, currently the best bodybuilder in Brazil right now, Rafael. Now I gotta be honest, this lineup doesn't hold up as well as the ones from Ohio and the UK, and given who is showing up, I think it is Rafael's show to lose. But I still want to build up a little hype on my channel for the show. So I want to compare Tonio from his latest showing the 2023 Mr. Olympia against Rafael's latest showing the 2024 Arnold Classic. However, I want to throw in a wild card too, a true wild card. I want to make this a three-way comparison because in addition to the predicted top two, we have a real freak finally making his pro debut at the show. You read the title, of course you know I'm talking about Vitaly Ugonikov, aka Good Vito. Now I'm just throwing him in as a wild card, so don't take his inclusion super seriously. The fact is, Good Vito turned pro in 2022 and has yet to make his pro debut, so his latest version obviously won't be what we get on stage. Not to mention the sizing for Good Vito is probably off because I have nothing to go on. He's never stood next to any other pros on stage. But he's a shorter guy and I think he's around Tonio height, so just for simplicity I took the best photos I can find, admittedly not many, and made him the same height as Tonio. Like I said, he's a freak and he has a lot of hype, but at this moment he's just a wild card. We have no idea what he looks like now, let alone how he compares to other pros. So I included him for the fun of it, but just to let you know, I have my doubts about Good Vito. But I wanted to make this a little more interesting and build up the hype like I said earlier. So anyway, here's my first and only 2024 Arnold Classic South America preview. This is Rafael versus Tonio versus Good Vito. If you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more, and check in to my Arnold Brazil live streams when the days of the show arrive. Starting of course with the front double, we can see Rafael's big advantage right from the get-go. Over Tonio and Vito, Rafael has the height, and at least over Tonio he has the better structure. And this is going to be an uphill battle for both of these guys on that basis alone. Rafael is filling out his frame now, and once a taller, more structurally gifted guy does that, shorter guys have to be firing on all cylinders and they have to go that extra mile to beat those taller guys. And at least in this pose, Tonio doesn't do that. His structure is good, but not as good as the other guys. His shoulder to waist ratio is nowhere near Rafael's, let alone Good Vito's. And Tonio has the weakest arms of the bunch. I'm going to say this a lot in this comparison, but bigger, in some cases, is truly better. Like I said, Rafael beats him in structure, and the arms, and throwing the legs too for the deeper separation. Not to mention he is just overall bigger. And roughly the same can be said about Good Vito. He also beats Tonio in the legs because of the separation, and in the arms, and in the overall X-frame. With that said, I have to put Tonio on last here. The other guys are just on another level. But now what I'm about to say may shock some people, especially because I just said I was doubting Good Vito's abilities and questioning the hype. But in the front double at least, I think he beats Rafael. All of Good Vito's strong suits are on display here and all of his weaknesses are absent. Rafael is solid though, but just take a look at them both as a whole. Good Vito has one of the best X-frames in the pro circuit already, and he hasn't even competed as a pro yet. His structure is just crazy, and he's packing on a ton of mass in some key areas. Usually Rafael beats everyone in the legs. His quads are just so huge and he brings them in very separated. And don't get me wrong, he still beats Vito, but Vito is right there in terms of size and he has some good cuts himself. Rafael just wins the legs with better polish and detail. But in the torso, Good Vito has the more pronounced V taper, and since his legs on the bottom are huge, about equal to Rafa's, Vito actually has the overall better X-frame. And finally in the arms, I have Good Vito as well. I think his arms are a little more symmetrical despite the lopsided posing, and he has roughly similar biceps to Rafael but a little more hang in the triceps. I think as long as Good Vito ups his conditioning a little bit and keeps the proportions intact, he could contend with a lot of top pros at least in this shot. In fact, I'm just going to give it to him in this comparison, why not? He's going to have some trouble in most of these other poses and he legitimately looks good here. So I'm going to give him the front double biceps to start this comparison off. Moving over to the front lat spread, I think everyone is actually a bit better than in the last pose. I think Tonio is much better in this pose. But again, the other two are just more gifted in terms of structure. Even Good Vito over there is looking exactly like the letter X. It's crazy. Now the picture obviously doesn't do Good Vito justice. Like I said, Vito has not competed as a pro, so good photos are hard to come by. But we can still see that he has that amazing structure. However, I just don't know how he's going to compare. And I don't really want to give him the benefit of the doubt and saying he's beating the other guys on structure because I have no idea what he's going to look like in real life. I will say he definitely has the potential to beat both of them in this shot, just on that structure alone, but the other guys are really good too. The photo quality sucks, but even still his arms seem to flatten out and his upper body conditioning looks lackluster. So as for right now, I think he can be deadly in this shot, but I'm going to have to put him in third just so I don't speculate too much. A third place, but with a huge asterisk by it. That leaves us with Rafael and Tonio, who actually look very, very similar. They both have wide legs, but Rafael has the better separation, mind you, and their upper bodies are very similar. They both have the same lat shape and basically the same insertion points relative to their own own physiques and their height. But again, when all things are equal, why not just go with the bigger guy? Rafael is literally just like if you increased Tonio's photo in Photoshop. And with that, everything on Rafael is bigger. The legs, the arms, chest, lats, everything. And the taper is borderline identical as well as the overall outline. Tonio's condition also doesn't appear to be much better, if at all, so he can't win on the quality argument either. So in this quality versus quantity debate, the winner is quantity, because everything else is similar, so Rafael wins the front lat spread. The side chest is actually a respectable pose for everyone. You think that Rafael and Tonio would be better in those first two poses since they're more aesthetic guys, but no, they actually pull off these side shots very well. Even good Vito has some good mass from this angle, especially in the side leg, and he has some good cuts down there. Unfortunately for good Vito, he gets derailed in the upper body, and that's where he loses the pose. He has a good amount of mass, but it's largely unrefined. The conditioning is just not there, and although it's a good level of mass, I think he actually gets beaten by Rafael just straight up, and Tonio with his greater roundness and conditioning beats him upstairs. And Tonio even looks alright in the lower body. Good Vito's posing also needs a little bit of tweaking. Get used to me saying that. It's not super bad here, but he doesn't do himself any favors. He could pose the upper body a little better, that's all I'm going to say for this one. Overall, he's smooth up top, and the pecs don't look super thick and are also lacking detail. So he will actually get a third place on this one. That leaves us with Tonio and Rafael, and I just have to say here, again, bigger is better. First of all, props to Rafael for his improvements in this shot. When he came out at the 2024 Arnold Classic, this was the first shot where I could really notice that extra 15-ish pounds he said he put on. He surprisingly thickened the chest, and that arm and delt really blew up. These areas, the chest, shoulders, and arms, were his most improved, and that's just the nail in the coffin for Tonio. Tonio is like a smaller Dexter Jackson, especially in this shot. He's very complete top to bottom, and although he's not the biggest, he brings a lot of roundness to compensate. And of course, like Dexter, his conditioning is terrific, but it's just not enough when you're getting dwarfed by this much. Maybe Tonio is a little drier, but does that really matter? In the side leg, I may actually like Tonio more, but look at Rafael's hamstring drop versus Tonio's. And really, Rafael isn't out of condition either. Tonio is just a hair drier. So honestly, I could throw Tonio a bone there and have him winning the lower body. But then go upstairs. What does Tonio win? Not the arm nor the delt. Rafael is bigger in the delt, bi, and tri, and he's actually more detailed in that delt. Just look at the striations. And even in the all-important pecs, Rafael is not only so much more massive, but he's also okay in detail too. I actually don't think this picture does his level of striations justice. And then zoom out as a whole. Look at how much wider shoulder to shoulder Rafael is, and look at how much more size he's carrying. Tonio's roundness and a little extra dryness just aren't enough. Finally, turning to the rear, we actually do have a pose that Tonio wins. Rafael's back is his weakest area, and it's arguably Tonio's strongest. Tonio's extra level of dryness and details help him out in the rear double a lot, because this pose is all about carving those extra details. In the lower body between him and Rafael, I would honestly go with Tonio. His glutes are more peeled and his hamstrings are more dug out. Rafael does of course make this closer though because she's just so much bigger. But to me, in this shot at least, I want to see those peeled glutes and hams, and Tonio fits the mold better. But even if you have Rafa in the wheels, the back is going to Tonio. Now sure, Rafael does peel off a couple of wins in the upper body. I have him in the delts and the arms just because he's bigger, and I have him winning the width department of the back, thanks to his bigger and wider structure. But those things aren't as important as what Tonio wins. Tonio is winning detail and conditioning. All those upper back muscles are clearly more defined and even pop more on Tonio's physique. His lower back and lat insertion area are crispier too. And sure, even though he's not as wide as Rafa, Tonio has that pleasing V shape to his back. So Tonio wins this pose. Is it by much though? I'm not too sure. Rafael is really wide in the back, and his back detail and thickness are improving. And some people may even have him in the lower body currently. So maybe it's not the margin Tonio would like to win this by. I think the mass and structural advantage that Rafael has does allow him to intrude on the margin for Tonio. But hey, a win is a win. Oh, and notice I didn't even discuss good Vito in this pose. Yeah, there's no need. That is nowhere near a pro level back. The lower body is okay, but the awkward squatting is ridiculous looking. This pose needs completely overhauled. Not just in the gym too with some better back training, but the pose itself needs work for some better execution. I expected Rafael to do better in the second back pose since he's so much wider, but nope, Tonio makes it 2 for 2. In fact, all the placings from the last back pose are staying the same. This is again another two-man race between Tonio and Rafael. Good Vito's back is just too flimsy. His width is better than his detail is, but that doesn't really say much. The lower body is good yet again, but the weird squatting makes him look a little silly. Overall, this back pose is a little bit better for him, but the back as a whole will still be a major problem for him at the Arnold Brazil if it hasn't been brought up significantly. So here we are with the first and second, yet again, Tonio and Rafael. Now Rafael is wider, just straight up, I'll get that out of the way. But his back just doesn't have that thickness, detail, nor conditioning of Tonio's. Tonio is surprisingly wide in the shot for being several inches shorter than Rafa. Proportionally speaking, I think he actually is wider than Rafael. But in real life, Rafael is obviously just bigger and wider. But look how thick Tonio's lats are. They're just so full. Again, they kind of remind you of Dexter Jackson's. Tonio also wins the conditioning. Look at all the vascularity in Tonio's back. And this is with Tonio's lighting doing him dirty yet again. But even with that, his back looks much drier than Rafa's. His lower back is also tighter, and the lower body, again, man is too. Which means I have to give Tonio the lower body for the same reasons I did in the last shot. But again, like the last shot, it's understandable if you give it to Rafa because he's much bigger. So with the more filled in back and the great width proportionally, plus that slight win on the lower body, I'm going with Tonio on this one. But not by as much as the last back post at all. I think Tonio has the much better, more complete back, but Rafael is wide, and in the lat spread that matters a ton. So really I'm only giving this to Tonio by a few percent because he's very wide, a bit fuller, and a bit more conditioned, but this could easily be another pose where quantity prevails, especially with that great width on Rafa. We're returning to the side one more time for the side tricep, and the criteria is almost the same as for the side chest. These side shots are where thickness and size from the side angle reign supreme. And I know I may sound like a broken record, but come on, in these side shots, what do you think happens? Bigger is better. It's basically a rehash of the side chest for that reason. Sure, Tonio has some better conditioning. He seems to be the driest one out of all of these guys. His tricep may even be just a hair bigger than Rafael's, thanks to Tonio's slightly longer tricep. And you could probably throw the abs in there for Tonio too, but these things just aren't enough against Rafael. I think they're enough to topple good Vito. Vito looks oddly flat in the pecs here, and his side leg looks a little soft, and that tricep is a bit skinny. Now again, the photo sucks, but I think Tonio is beating him in most places anyway. Tonio is clearly more separated in his side leg and is more 3D in the pecs, shoulders, and of course the tricep. So I think good Vito has to take a third place here, but I have a feeling he's leaving a lot on the table, not just for this shot, but for both of the side shots. I think he has the tools, it's just a matter of expanding on his assets and presenting them better. For now though, he's third. But back to Rafa versus Tonio. Tonio is pretty round, fairly streamlined, but just not big enough. Rafael is bigger in the side leg, by a lot. He's thicker in the pecs, he beats Tonio in the delt on both mass and detail, and his tricep is very defined. But again, Tonio is probably slightly ahead here. Even Rafael's midsection, although not beating Tonio's, is locked in and streamlined. Tonio just has the better set of abs. But are those things that Tonio does right enough? Well, not for me, especially from the side. I think this is actually a little bit of a stronger pose for Tonio compared to the side chest, but Tonio just can't make up the size deficit. If he was a bit bigger, his conditioning could maybe help him surpass Rafael, but right now the gap is too big thanks to Rafael's superior thickness. The abs and thighs is probably the most interesting pose of this comparison. I actually think the winner of these elements that we look for in this pose, the abs and the thighs, can be found on different guys. Not only that, but good Vito also isn't an automatic write-off on this one. He's actually bringing a strong pose. Let's just break this pose down by trying to find the best elements, starting with the thighs. Well, first of all, these guys are all bringing great lower bodies, but I have to go with Rafael for the win here, followed closely by good Vito, and then closely followed by Tonio. I like Rafael because he's probably the biggest, although all these guys have huge quads, but Rafael has the cleanest separation, and I've always liked that about his quads and the shape to them. Then I actually have good Vito over Tonio for the same reason, separation. Tonio's quads are huge, but so are Vito's, but Tonio doesn't have the deep separation in his quads, which is pretty important to me at least. But Tonio is absolutely no slouch here. He's still separated, just not as separated as Rafael, and overall Vito has the better quads when considering size and feathering. No one is a loser here though. But now what about the abs? Well, the winner here is actually Tonio. He has the most symmetrical set of abs and the most deeply defined set as well, by a lot. Rafael has never honestly been super strong in the abs themselves. His waistline is good, and he's obviously one of the most aesthetic guys in the open IFBB right now, but the abs are fairly shallow and he's only sporting a 4-pack. Honestly, I may even like Vito's midsection more. And the abs, Vito is also sporting a pretty shallow 2 to 4-pack, but he brings in sharper obliques, and surprisingly has the better V taper up top, which is an important aspect of the pose. And that brings us to the question, who is bringing the best pose as a whole? Well, actually, I have to go with Tonio. Remember, everyone's legs were good. Tonio's were just a little bit behind the rest, but his abs were by far the best, so when you average everything out, he's the best here overall. I see the other two guys as pretty mediocre since they're lacking deep sets of abs, but who places higher between Vito and Rafa? Honestly, screw it, I'm just going with good Vito, deal with it. I like his taper more, his legs are the second best, and the abs aren't exactly worse than Rafa's. Maybe they are, but they're both fairly mediocre. So after Tonio, it's really whatever, but to make things interesting, I'm going to go with Vito. Finally, we are here at the last pose of the comparison, the most muscular. We're ending off with a competitive one. I think on show day, everyone will have the tools to win. Even good Vito, who may be taking third in this comparison, but he definitely has what he needs. He just needs to present it better. Good Vito is taking third here, but this probably does have a lot to do with the photo quality. But still, he's leaning way too far forward. The traps flatten out because of that, and the delts in the arms look flattened out too. And there's nothing going on in the pecs. Good Vito clearly has a lot of raw mass though, and he has that good wide upper body that works well in this pose. But right now, he's just too unpolished. He needs more pop, more detail, and some better posing. I expect something much better on show day though. Good Vito was just built for this pose. He can actually catapult all the way up to first if he plays his cards right. Now we get even more competitive. Tonio brings a ton of 3D roundness and great details, but Rafael is so much wider and has been working in to fill his gaps on his bigger frame. Let's end this comparison by breaking this down body part for body part. In the legs, like every other front shot, I have Rafael. He's just too big and too separated for Tonio. In the arms, this is close than some of the other poses, but I just gotta go with the bigger arms here, Rafa. Now in the delts, Tonio is bringing some popping cannonballs. The roundness and that capped off look here are crazy. But Rafael is right there if not winning. He may not be as bursting full, but he has more mass than Tonio, so he doesn't need that pop. And finally in the pecs, with Tonio's narrower structure, his pecs have that bunched up look. They're detailed, but I just don't like how they look, and they're not super thick either. Rafael's pecs could use a little bit more thickness in the upper region from this angle, and perhaps some more detail, but he far and away has the more appealing chest. And overall, just taking a gander at these physiques in totality, you gotta go with Rafa. Let's put it this way, if Tonio was standing behind Rafael, and they were both hitting this pose, you wouldn't even see him. That's how much more space Rafael takes up compared to Tonio. Rafael definitely wins structurally and is pretty filled out, but Tonio is right there in terms of pound for pound muscularity. He's looking stacked. Overall, this is the closest pose of the comparison. I would say Rafael isn't the most filled out, but he wins more body parts surprisingly, and is so huge structurally. Tonio is a little bit more compact, but just as muscular per square inch with some slightly better details. I can honestly see this going either way, but I'm going with the more impressive one here. And for me, it's again Rafael. This is definitely a case where quality can win the quantity versus quality debate, because I think Tonio does have enough conditioning and pop to win this. But in my personal opinion, I just prefer Rafael for being much wider, winning a lot of body parts, and just being bigger. So Rafael takes the last pose of this comparison. So this turned out to be a two-man race, go figure. We were comparing an amateur bodybuilder technically against two top 10 Olympians. I think good Vito can be a threat here, and definitely will be in the future. He just needs to put it all together. He needs three main things: a much better back, sharper conditioning, pro-level conditioning, and some better posing. He already has some good size and obviously a great structure. But other than that, you can tell he needs a little more time in the oven. And looking at my scorecard, he was in a clear third with 21 points and just winning one pose. So that's going to do it for good Vito in this video. I'm excited to see what he's done in the 2 years since the photos we used in this comparison, and depending on how much he improved, keep an eye on him. For good Vito, it's no longer a matter of if he will be a top pro and an Olympian, it's a matter of when. This will be his first true test, so let's get excited to see him, but let's not hype him up too much and set the bar too high. After all, this will be his pro debut. So it comes down to Rafael Brandao and Tonio Burton, which of course we all expect to be the actual 1 and 2 on the day of the show. Now on my scorecard, this was actually as close as it could get. Rafael won, sure, but just by 1 point and by 1 pose. But of course this was for the 3-way race, so when you drop good Vito out of the scoring, Rafael actually wins 5 poses to Tonio's 3. So sure, it's a bit closer, but not as close as it was on the 3-way scorecard. And yes, I do agree with these results, and I think Rafael is in the driver's seat heading into the show. What did I say probably a dozen times throughout this comparison? Bigger is better. However, let me expand on that. When things are close or equal, bigger is better. I can't sum this one up any better than that phrase. As long as Rafael's conditioning is solid and he's not getting blown out of the water there, and as long as Tonio didn't blow up and add a ton of size, Rafael should be able to pull this one off and win on his home turf. That's what happened in this comparison. Rafael's condition wasn't as good as Tonio's, but it was still solid. And in some areas like the legs, Rafael actually did have better separation. And in terms of muscularity, Rafael was winning a lot of body parts, and of course was just so much bigger and takes up so much more space next to Tonio. Now Tonio did win in the back department, and I think he solidly won the rear double. The rear lat spread definitely could be debated though, but Tonio's overall back development could help him get some wins over Rafa. And Tonio is very complete himself, but it's just on a smaller frame. And with this version from the 2023 Olympia, the level of size just wasn't enough. Not to mention Rafael's shape was better. Tonio was comparable, but Rafael's a touch more aesthetic. So with that said, what can Tonio win on? In this comparison, he wasn't carrying enough size, and Rafael was good enough in condition to get himself over the finish line. Tonio does have a path to victory though. He needs 2 things. He needs to be clearly more conditioned than Rafael. This probably does require Rafael to come in at least a little off though, while Tonio is in the condition of his life. That last part is basically already done. Tonio said that he's in his best conditioning yet, but he probably needs that gap to be as big as possible. The second thing Tonio needs to do is be a bit bigger. He has every body part, but he needs them all to be bigger, so he can compete with Rafael's superior height, structure, and overall size. If Tonio can make those 2 things happen, then he could beat Rafael. I do think this will actually be somewhat close regardless. Just as is, Tonio managed to pick off 3 poses from Rafael by my estimation, but that still puts Rafael ahead going into this weekend. For this comparison, Rafael skated to victory with his superior size, structure, and held it together in regards to conditioning. So Rafael is the winner of today's comparison. And as for my actual show day predictions, at least for these 2, I am predicting the win for Rafael. Maybe Tonio gets close with a first place vote or 2, but I expect Rafael to be walking away with the Arnold Classic South America title after this weekend. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know down in the comments how you saw this comparison, and leave me your predictions for the Arnold Brazil. And don't forget, I plan on going live for the Arnold Brazil, assuming there is a live stream of decent quality. So subscribe to my channel and turn notifications on so you don't miss when I'm going live on Saturday the 6th and Sunday the 7th. And you should subscribe to my channel and like the video anyway to stay up to date on all my future videos just like this one. By the way, if you guys are looking for any high quality supplements to help you with your fitness goals, look no further than Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code PROJECT10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 at armsracenutrition.com. Finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, I'm gonna have my name in the stars, set my that Lexi, yeah. Gotta get that Lexi, yeah.